Yeah. I love you too, Mama Tommy.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. That's good. And that fourth Harry Potter, boy oh boy.
Speaking of Harry Potter, Roma, and Children of Men, let's talk about Annihilation.
That's not the same director.
Here on I'm just getting us rolling by hook or by crook. Welcome to Frame Rate, the show where we rate frames.
Yeah.
Including Quaron frames someday.
Mm-hmm. Hopefully.
But not today. Today we're talking about Annihilation.
Last year, 2018.
I'm one of the guys, Michael Swain.
I'm the other guy, Abe Epperson.
And we have with us a very important third guy.
Hey,
third guy.
Hey,
who are you?
It's me, third guy, Jack O'Brien.
Hey.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Jack O'Brien.
First and second
J.O.B.
guys.
Chief himself.
Yeah.
All the Agents of Crack chief superlatives based
Welcome
on
to the
Jack
show.
O'Brien.
Right, definitely. All apply.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome
it's great
to the
to
show.
be here, guys.
Let's all use this cadence for the rest of the thing. No, let's dive right the fuck in because I know Abe's wanted to cover Annihilation for quite some time. And it's one of those nerd movies
Abe looks like he just came.
that has the Moby Dick levels of shit to unpack, so we better
Yeah.
get going.
Mm.
Jack, as our vaunted guest,
Yes.
pillar of the podcasting community, please kick things off just because you chose the movie. You hadn't
I
seen
did.
it before.
I haven't even seen Ex Machina, guys.
Oh,
That's
so
insane,
this is
right?
like-
I think
so
I'm
we
one of
won't-
the
This
few.
is your first Garland.
We won't
Yeah.
discuss that in depth then.
Well,
but
no, you
we'll
should
stick to
though, because I know what
Annihilation.
happens in Ex
Did you ever
Machina,
watch
so-
Sunshine? The
No.
Danny Boyle?
Uh-uh.
He wrote
Yeah,
that.
I'm-
But anyway.
As a person with kids, I don't get to see movies anymore. It's
All right.
terrible.
So
Sounds
why'd you
horrible.
pick Annihilation? What appealed
Because
to
I've
you about
wanted
it? And what
to-
was your initial reaction?
It just always looked interesting to me, and I know he's an important filmmaker, even though I hadn't seen either of his movies.
There's
and
been a
Ex
buzz.
Machina
Yeah.
wasn't on your list.
Right. Well,
So-
you have your pulse on the zeitgeist. It's
Right.
literally your job.
Right.
So you're aware of things anyway.
Yeah, exactly. I keep I still follow the weekly box office reports, even though I don't
Yeah.
get to see the movies. I'm like, oh man, keep that one in the old memory bank for when I have free time again. But yeah, this was. Yeah, it looked interesting, and it also seemed like one of those ideas or one of those movies that has a lot of ideas in it, or
Right.
like that's the sense I got, and
Yeah.
I wasn't disappointed
No,
by
that
that.
is true.
Yeah.
Did you feel as that the film as a whole was too heady, or did you
I don't think
glimpse
I
what
don't-
it was trying to drop?
Did you leave with any level of confusion, or did you have a full interpretation that made sense to you the first time through?
I don't know that it all cohered for me necessarily.
Mm.
But I don't know that my favorite movies all like inherently cohere
Sure.
as like one, you know.
No, it's a
Yeah.
great.
Yeah,
Mulholland
there
Drive
was
kicks
ju-
ass.
Yeah, there's just a lot of
I love
interesting things.
movies that ends
Yeah.
with questions, not
Yeah.
answers. Yeah.
Although I would say, because this is only the second time I ever watched it, was in preparation for this, and also interestingly, there was a lot of pushback from studios throughout the process. What we saw is a negotiation between, because on one level it's a story about incomprehensibility and the limits of human knowledge.
Yes.
So Alex Garland, of course, being a sci-fi buff and the writer, wanted to push it even further. The studio, being the studio, thinks that audiences are dumb and wanted it to be way more clear and concrete.
Right.
Well, we got navigated both poles. But I would say upon a second viewing, it's way more clear and concrete to me than I expected it to be.
Yeah.
I actually now decoded, I think, pretty much everything. And I'm like, oh, I totally get it.
Yeah, I feel like I totally get it.
And it's very helpful on a second watch just because the time just disjoints. Like going in knowing that she had the affair, all the flashbacks, you can decode on the fly and know exactly what they mean. So I think some of the coherence just comes from watching it a second time. And people, if you liked it, I urge you to watch it a second time.
Right.
There's enough ideas there that I got just as much out of it watching it again.
Yeah. And by the way, the producer that you want to give credit to for that fight back, because he had Final Cut, was Scott Rudin. All the other, I forget what studio did this, but all the other, I think Paramount, all the other producers were like, don't even like that it's ambiguous at the end, and don't like that ending shimmer shot in Lena's eyes and stuff like that. We want it absolutely to be, she survived, she killed her doppelganger, she's back.
The real
Right.
one.
And
wins.
Scott Rudin was like, nope. And
Yeah,
not going to
cool.
explain why, because I have Final Cut. So I'm
Right.
siding with the director.
But that's what I mean is also if you give it the focus and attention it deserves, it's explained why. It's clear.
Yeah.
There is enough information in the film
Right.
to know everything that happens.
Exactly.
Clearly. Yeah.
Some of them are just so squeak by
Right.
that it's like you'll catch one of them and then that will put you into a thought chain that will be like, maybe this is true. But if you catch all of them, it's undeniable what's happening.
Right.
Like to the teams, to the personal experiences, what Oscar Isaac is, what his point is in the movie, like all of those things seem to coalesce.
Let's start asking and answering some of those questions.
Yeah,
I would say, like, what do you think are the top level themes of the film?
I mean, maybe because of the other. Is it too behind the scenes to say that we pair these with other movies?
No, that's fine.
No.
Because these were both such violent movies.
And by other movie, you mean you also watched
we
Bone Tomahawk?
also watched Bone Tomahawk, and the theme of sort of self-destruction being that was the most interesting idea for me. The idea that self-destruction is not like some aberration, but actually part of like our very code, like down to the cellular level.
Right.
And that was also an interesting way to understand like why we find beauty in violence, like why we find violence inherently beautiful.
Or monstrosity in a way, as a mutagen.
Yeah, and I don't know, that just kind of I felt like that was in every different part of the movie.
Yeah.
It was sort of that.
Yeah, two details jumped out at me this time about that. One is that Lena Natalie Portman in one of the flashbacks is reading The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, which of course like echoes her little monologue earlier about how cells can artificially be made to never die. We did that with Henrietta Lacks' cells. So that's what's so interesting to me is one certainly the theme is self-destruction, but I do think it's left ambiguous what the conclusion is. Because, like, in one sense, because annihilation in science very specifically means when a particle meets an antiparticle. And yes, they destroy each other, but they release an equal amount of energy, which is a new thing. So Ventris very pointedly says self-destruction is not the same as suicide, because that's actually you cease to exist.
And that's Jennifer Jason Leigh, just so everyone's,
But then also Lena in one of the flashbacks is asking Kane, or very adamantly telling Kane, that she thinks the fact that cells don't have to die and yet they do proves that God is capable of mistakes. Or another way of saying it is like that the universe is inherently flawed. Right. So I do think it's still left open. It's like observing self-destruction is baked into us. And then the question is that an error? Like, does that give us extra beauty because it combines with our virtues and our flaws combine to release a special kind of energy? Or is it flat up a mistake? And I spent a lot of time thinking about that. Like,
that's interesting.
Because certainly pain and struggles cause us to grow and become better versions of ourselves. But there's a certain amount of trauma where you're like, I'm not learning from this. This is extra arbitrary trauma that is just happening by happenstance.
Right.
Like, how much pain is useful in life and how much is a burden?
But
go ahead. No, well, I was just gonna, I don't know, I can't speak for you, but I was gonna say I'm still, based off my assumption of what Jack's saying, I'm in the Jack camp, just because I think that it's just that this movie has three themes that kind of coalesce to one. One is refraction, one is self-annihilation or self-destruction, and the last one is mutation.
Cancer or mutation. They're bound up together.
And they're all talked about, and just to give people who have seen it but may need a refresher, it's mentioned at 2x2 kind of lines I want to paraphrase. Is one from Portman when she's describing cancer at the beginning of the film. She says, we can describe cancer as a mutagen that causes unregulated cell growth. It changes us. Right. Speaking about an internal cancer. And that's one thing that is now external by the shimmer. And the shimmer is this thing described by Tessa Thompson, who's a physicist, discussing about how it refracts. And refraction is kind of a weird concept in physics, because the best way to do it is consider a prism. where you have all light come in and then it separates in its component parts of color and gives you a spectrum. And she says it's kind of like that, but with light and radio waves. That's why it looks like
and
the way
reality,
it does, and we can't talk into it. But she's like, but as we look at like on the edge of the shimmer and what we can see, the trees themselves are doing that. So it somehow is doing that with DNA.
Right.
So now we have these two ideas, the cancer and the refraction. And what we see that it's this kind of idea of spreading oneself both internally and externally. Externally meaning how you live your lives. If you sleep on your spouse, if you cut yourself, if you have a past, how that prepares you, which is your question, for the oncoming onslaught. Or is it a matter of just complete mutagen, where it's just your cells just, as they say, unregulated cell growth, and it just copies and copies of copies, and it's useless DNA that is not helpful to this. I think if I were to put a gun to Alex Garland's head and say which one is it, he'd probably be like, sometimes it's useful, sometimes it's not. That's what makes evolution. Sometimes you just are a bad organism because you didn't evolve in a way.
Exactly. I think the movie in some ways is comparing actual lived experience of life, like our personal bedroom dramas and shit that happens in our life that feels like a story, to the big, wet, hot mess of primordial growth.
Yeah.
Like, certainly the mutation aspects are called out because it's literally happening, which gives you the cool action sequences.
Right.
And the cool imagery, like plants are learning to grow in the shape of a human body. Also, of course, I just love how consistent all those bag of tricks are. For example, every lens flare in the movie is a rainbow because of the prism thing Abe mentioned.
Yeah.
Everything visually supports everything so well. Even to the point that I'm pretty sure some of the things that I wondered about before are evidence of just the general refraction, like why Kane suddenly has a Texas draw.
Right.
I think it was refracted onto him from someone else who entered the area probably had a Texas draw at some point.
It's happening all over.
That's why the tattoo bounces around between people.
So someone took this, elaborated on this theory online about the scare bear, or as they call it, the bear that steals Cass's
scream bear.
Scream bear. Scare
it
bear.
eats your voice box and then screams like you're dead.
No, it doesn't even eat your voice box. It is kind of like in the same way that the crocodile has shark teeth.
No, but it very pointedly eats their voice boxes.
Sure,
that is like
that's
a
how
element of the horror.
But it's accumulating not just the DNA, but the experiences and the thought processes of. So it's probably just thinking it's an animal, but when it yells, it makes the sound that Cass made in her death thralls.
Or whoever it most recently
Another
killed.
example is the tattoo starts spreading around. The Ouroboros that looks like an infinity symbol is like clearly a military tat. And I think the first time we see it is on Anya, but who's like the boots on the ground.
She's like the paramedic soldier.
And then we see it on Portman at some point.
And then on Shepard as well, and Kane in the video.
Yeah, and it's like even that, there seems to be accents, just the way in which they are. The final speech given by Ventress in like the cave at the lighthouse talks about like, I don't even think it wants. Like I don't.
She says, "I don't know what it wants, or if it wants." I just think it's an important distinction that she's actually just claiming full ignorance. I cannot comprehend what it wants.
I can't. It's so incomprehensible to me. And then she bursts into a non-corporeal Mandelbulb is what Alex Garland
You mean a
called
Mandelbrot fractal?
Yeah, he calls it a Mandelbulb in his script.
Oh, because it's like a Mandelbrot fractal rendered in 3 dimensions.
As like a flower.
As a bulb.
And then eventually turns into a sexless Natalie Portman that slowly turns into. Yeah, and that's something we'll need to unpack. But I just think that's how we get from refraction and mutation, how they all interplay, is just the idea of you separate aspects like your accent or a tattoo is very like we can perceive that, but also imagine the turmoil that's going on in their head as they have thoughts and memories of other people and they can't make sense of it. That's the kind of refraction we're talking about, because at the end of the day, I think this organism or entity, or maybe it's just, who knows what it is, it's an environmental cancer, that's for one thing for sure. It's seaming it all together. It's like a copy machine.
Although interesting to note, at one point the movie was going to end with a bunch more meteors coming in to the atmosphere from a single direction to make it clear that it was an alien invasion.
It had an intention.
But I'm sure that's the studio wanted that.
Well, the books are Jeff Vandermeer, and it's called Southern Reach, and Alex Garland only read one of them.
Oh,
yeah.
And as he talks about,
threw it away because I've read the book and I would say it is almost unrelated. It's interesting in how
talks
unrelated
about that.
it
He
is.
says it's like it's less of an adaptation and more of like a memory of a book.
Right.
You know.
Right.
Yeah.
He just plays with the things that Southern Reach is playing with.
Yeah, because I think you're right. I think the theme of mutation, importantly, is tied to all the questions about what actually is your identity as a conscious living thing anyway. Like Shepard says, when my daughter died, it was 2 bereavements, my daughter and the person I used to be, implying like this language that we all use where we say things like, I'm a different person now. Or like Brett Kavanaugh will be like, yeah, I drank beers with Squee then, but you can't blame me because now I'm a different person.
Yeah. Right.
So mutation and the fundamental malleability of our cellular structure and the fact that Natalie Portman could have an affair and then like everything's different. It's this whole sloppy mess of, well, in life you are also constantly in a state of flux. Your emotional state also is refracting and mutating. Right. So what is identity? And they can't answer that because it's one of the quintessential philosophical questions. But man, do they tie it together so tightly. Like Alex Garland's so thorough. Like even as an example, of course, the tattoo functionally reveals a clue about I understand how this works. But also it's, of course, the perfect tattoo.
Right.
Because it's an ancient symbol of change and self-destruction that lasts eternally. That life is transient and will always change.
So, it also visually looks like mitosis.
Yeah,
it looks like infinity
splitting.
or two cells splitting.
It's the perfect image.
And it's a snake eating itself, which is an act of self-destruction. So it's like in every aspect. And it's not just that. I think why film nerds especially love Alex Garland is there's an old saying in filmmaking and in playwriting, which is that ideally every aspect of everything should be shouting what you're trying to talk about every second. And Alex Garland nails it. Like
here's another
every
one.
detail in frame. The fact that the lighting is a rainbow provides content.
Here's another one, Jack. Did you notice that the music of the film, the score is folksy and naturalistic?
I did notice that.
Yeah,
that
and then the second they walk into the shimmer, it's still trying. It's still the same folk music, but it's slowly deteriorating into synth music.
Right.
Until by the end, it's entirely synthetic.
Yeah.
It mutated.
Yeah.
And yet some of
still
the score,
same theme
and same chord structure. So
musically,
the score mutated.
Yeah,
it's perfect.
Yeah. Another tidbit, just like the Ouroboros, is that people don't catch because they're so far away from each other on the film. Is the house that she and Oscar Isaacs lived in
when things were good,
identical to the house that is where the field of plant people are that they go and stay in, where the screen bear, all that stuff. It's identical, except it's been taken over by like nature.
So there's several ways in the film in which it's implied that if you're in the shimmer long enough, it starts to sort of dance with you, your emotional state. So because she's bringing in all this guilt about her affair, it starts to manifest things that will make her feel more guilty, which is arguably why she keeps having nightmares about the affair every night she's
also
in the shimmer.
Brings up the idea of an unreliable narrator where she's conflating so many things because her mind is confused. And so we're not necessarily seeing the events as they were unfolding, but as she interpreted them.
This can't just be us explaining it to Jack, though. I do want Jack to have some.
Yes,
because another thing is
that I needed to know.
I want to make a point I think is very interesting is I would say Alex Garland is not that quotable on a dialogue level, meaning he's really a filmmaker's filmmaker. It's like he builds an essay by having the characters only bring content that is facts or provides new material to the table. There's never a thing where you're like, well, that was very Shane Blackey. I'm going to make a note of that so I can quote it on the podcast.
Yeah,
Everyone just says, look, this is what's happening now. I think this.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to me how impactful it is without having flair on the dialogue level. Alex Garland is a filmmaker, like even more than being a writer in some
Yeah.
way. He's like a composer of ideas.
Yeah, I mean, even when he was just a writer, like Sunshine, his characters were like hard to relate to because they're all scientists. And when there's that typical moment of like one of us needs to die because there's not enough oxygen, all of the scientists turn into each other and go, well, you're needed because you need to do this later in the mission. You're needed because you need to keep us alive. So me or you should die, like right now,
Right.
like because we're breathing.
And everyone is calm the whole time, which is it's my favorite scene in it. He goes like, well, what are like relevant details to your situation? Okay, blah blah blah. What are yours? Okay, seems like I should die. Okay, I'll do it. Well, it's been nice being on the crew.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like they're all professionals.
Everything for the
Right.
mission. That's
Right.
what we signed up for. This is a one-way trip anyway.
Yeah, so Garland his movies have a very scientific feel, and you were saying it did bomb, right?
Oh yes.
So the question is the studio wrong? Maybe people are too dumb to
No,
enjoy.
it is the children that are wrong.
Good. Principal Skinner line. Is it true? Could I be not cool anymore?
Could I be
No.
out of
No,
touch?
it is
No.
the
It is the children who are wrong. But it is alienating in a way, and I think it's the last thing before I'm going to force Jack to give some kind of spiel is and you read the first book?
No,
Aiden?
I haven't read any of
Oh,
it.
okay. Well, I think something that is cool about the book is fairly clunkily written, is also very sterile and alienating to read. The movie's better than the book, but the book does something that can only be done in book form, and I always love media that leans into what it is. That like proves like, this is why this is an opera. It has to be an opera because of this. So in the book, the unreliable narrator thing Abe is talking about is the entire crux of the theme, the central themes of the book. So it'll be like they enter a space and one of them in the group perceives them as being in like a musty stone area and going down a hallway. And they don't realize until they compare notes later that another person perceived them as being in a circular room made of flesh with the walls pulsing, and that they were constantly going down, 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 down. So it's literally like you could not depict that in a film because visually you have to show something.
What is happening?
What is happening? And the constant tension in the book that I do love is no one agrees literally about even who they're talking to, what they said a second ago, or what that is right in front of us right now.
Right.
They'll be like, no, it's a giant dragonfly. And they'll be like, no, it's a door. We have to go through the door.
Right.
It's like, really, you can't tell what the fuck is happening at any given time.
I do love the idea that like Alex Garland, he's got his blankie and his hot cup of cocoa and he's reading the book and it just says something like a robot plays like a flawless piece of music and then shuts down and he just goes like, oh yeah, baby, this is my shit.
No, it's more like in the book it'll have classic incomprehensibility descriptions like she stared into the shining light until she saw the shape of sadness pluck an orange from the undergrowth of heaven. And you're like, well, I don't know what that even means. Like, it doesn't even coalesce into an image in my mind.
Every time I hear about this book, it makes me think that Alex Garland made the right choice.
That's what I'm kind of getting at, is I think Alex Garland deserves full credit. This is not an adaptation. He almost shouldn't give credit to the book Annihilation.
Right.
It's so different. Yeah. The only same thing is that it's called The Shimmer and they go into it and wacky stuff happens. But
Right. Do you think there's a lot of beauty in The Shimmer, and the fact that it's called The Shimmer, like that's a beautiful like description. But even at one point they find somebody's remains and they've been like blown across a wall in such a way that it looks like a beautiful art installation.
Yeah.
But more like
It's got like
fungus.
symmetry,
Right.
fungus.
Grew inside him to
like-
the point that his body got extruded out.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Like, do you think the beauty is just because that's a cool thing to do as a filmmaker, or is that like tied into it in some way?
Personally, I think that he's trying to say that sometimes Annihilation is beautiful.
Right.
Sometimes mutations are amazing to look at.
Right.
And behold, and the fact that our DNA can flex in these weird ways is like a kind of cool. Like look at the does that they see
right
that
deer,
they're almost in tandem.
Yeah.
And like they have like flowers on their antlers. It's
Yeah.
like a beautifully like it
Right.
looks like a performance piece, like you said. I think there's a purpose to that, but it's also haunting because you're like, what's the motivation behind this?
Right.
So something can be super dark and ominous, but at the same time being like beautiful to behold.
And I think it's pointing to that Mother Nature doesn't care, and that the cancer inside you that's killing you, doesn't hate you. It's just doing what it does. So sometimes it will be cool looking. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
By chance. Like I noticed this time, even in the scene where she's talking to the guy she had the affair with after her lecture in the hallway, that Johns Hopkins wing is decorated with, like some hospitals are, close-ups of cancer cells, but painted in so they're all colorful and beautiful.
Right.
So again, in every frame, he hammers home like, ugly beauty, beauty ugly, like they're the same. Like that's one of the points.
And sometimes it's just ugly. Sometimes it's a scream bear or an alligator that's horrifying to look at.
But I do love, sorry, but when you say scream bear, my mind goes to that scene so hard.
It's
I
so
always forget
visceral.
what I was going to say. But concretely, I also picked up new things on my second watch. The reason that they make the point of, what's her name? Who's the physicist? Not Shepard, not Thornton. Josie Raddick.
Tessa.
The reason
Thompson,
reason they show Raddick find the knife that they just saw in the video of the snake intestines guy right there is, I'm pretty sure the guy who became the fungus on the wall is the guy who got his stomach cut open in the video.
Yeah, they were in the pool, the emptied pool, and so you can believe if there's like a caustic nature to the video and what they're witnessing immediately after the guy exploded.
Yeah. And I think it's funny because it's almost like the refraction works not like science, but like conceptual Mad Libs.
Sure.
Because it's like a sharkadile instead of a... You know, in real genetics, you could have like a shark who has goat genes in its DNA sequence, but you wouldn't notice that externally. You'd have to sequence its DNA.
But this literally has layers of teeth.
He's half shark, half crocodile.
Right.
And I do like... That seems to be how it works, because I think at the ocean, you see that either salt and seawater is learning to become trees, or trees are learning to become salt and seawater. Yeah. And I also thought, and this is a reach, but a southern reach, but I really like to think this time that the doe scene is a clue that helps unlock the true meaning of the final moment, like who is Lena now?
Mm-hmm.
And I think what it's saying is,
the lighthouse
it's not
rape,
important.
essentially.
Like, because you are changed, even if nothing happened with her being infected by the shimmer, she's a different person because she experienced this sequence of things.
Right.
What is identity anyway? So I think those two does, if you notice, are very similar, but not exactly the same. They don't literally mirror exactly. There's some deviation, and they share randomized parts of each other. So like, one has a body that's fur with some leaves, but its antlers are normal. One has antlers that has leaves on it, but its body is flowers and has some fur on the antlers, whatever. It's like a Venn diagram where they're different but the same and some parts overlap. And I think that's what Josie is when she comes out of the shimmer. I know that you can decode it in such a way that there's a clear answer. Is she the doppelganger or is she not? But I like the interpretation where the answer is, it doesn't matter. She's some combination, bundle of experiences and DNA that we're going to call Lena from now on.
Yeah.
That's all that matters.
Yeah, kind of like Grumblefly or whatever. Like how in The Fly.
Brundlefly.
Right, yeah. He decides to identify as a hyphenated version of both of them because he feels he's truly like that.
Similar logic, too, where a drop of your blood gets in the cloning machine. Because I have to assume that magic bulb was about to make a Ventress doppelganger.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But a drop of Lena's blood goes in, and it's like, ooh, tasty DNA. I'll make a Lena clone instead.
Yeah, it's just whatever. It's like input-output, I think, is my interpretation of it.
I don't understand, and I may never fully understand. I understand that the reason it brings you to the center, or my interpretation is that that's the only place there's enough energy or shimmer or whatever its power is that it can make a fully functioning human doppelganger.
That's
you have to
where
be in the
it landed.
lighthouse. Right. And the heart of it is where it does its best magic, which is to make a human doppelganger.
Yeah.
Right.
But I don't understand what it was going to do with Ventress if Lena hadn't come down there. Was it just going to make a Ventress doppelganger? What was its quote-unquote intention with Ventress?
I think the question is more, what was Ventress at that time?
Right.
When we witnessed it. Was she more gone than Lena? Was she even a thing? Like,
was she fully doppelganger
because
already?
one of the things we know about Ventress is that like everyone has like a flaw or like an action that shows a tendency towards self-destruction, and Ventress's is obsession with the shimmer. Like, she's literally obsessed with it.
And because she has terminal cancer, she's free to not give a shit about anything else.
Yeah, and she becomes like, I think that her want, because if we're going to talk about DNA and like accents and like how there's this nebulous kind of restriction between all of them, the definitions lose meaning.
Mm-hmm.
I think her obsession is what she becomes. So she just becomes the shimmer is my interpretation.
Do either of you have a theory on why she was either directed to or chose to, and the director approved it, acts like a hollow sociopath? Does that mean anything? Like, that actress has lots of emotion and range.
Oh, yeah.
And she chose very consciously to talk like this. This is all I ever talk like in this movie.
I think that's my personal feeling was that the choice was like akin to Brimley in The Thing original.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Wilfred, yeah.
Yeah, where he immediately as he knows he types up on the computer, he sees how horrifying the Thing can be, he becomes as disassociated with everything because he realizes that there's nothing that we can do. If it gets out, it's over for civilization.
So you think
as we know it,
she's just in shock in the way of someone who knows the world is ending. So
she knows
like, why
that
have
there's
emotion?
nothing we can do to stop it. We've nuked it. We've tried everything.
Also notice her only other acting trait, and I think it's so brilliant. She's constantly touching something smooth. She's tactile. In every scene, she's rubbing her fingers against each other, or when she's talking to Natalie Portman, she has a very smooth Riverstone she's playing with, and she has to force herself to stop fidgeting with it. You can notice. And I think that's simple foreshadowing, but effective. She has to touch the shimmer. Like, she has to get all the way into the middle and touch it. Like, she has
to grind it down.
Right.
Yeah.
Why do you think when she finds her in the vagina cave thing, why do you think she speaks like it's almost like,
I'm sorry, does your wife's vagina look like the basement of a lighthouse?
beautifully colorful?
There's
Yeah,
an ottoman in the corner.
Yeah. Wait, wasn't that like a cave that was created
That
by
is the whole.
asteroid
That is
strike?
the whole.
You're right.
Yeah.
It's the crater. Yeah.
Okay.
It's the crater.
But she like starts it almost, when you were describing how the book is written, it sounded like how she was speaking when Natalie Portman shows up. It's like a very like lyrical, like,
she says to the highest realms of thought, a mind that can't be known, shit like that.
Yeah. Is that what was that just basically the shimmer speaking through her, or was
That's what I'm asking is like, when she's there with the flesh blindfold, who is she and why does she say things? And
I think
one of the least clear
this
moments
reads
for
into
me.
my interpretation of the events as a whole, is that we're forever changed by our experiences in general.
Right.
Like whether it's that you're an addict or you cut yourself or your daughter died of leukemia or you are dying of leukemia or you are an adulterer. That's our 5 basic people. They all have tendencies towards annihilation. In fact, the moment in the film we see that she slept on Oscar Isaac is literally as she walks into the shimmer.
Every time you say slept on, but you mean cheated on. Because I love it's like she wasn't aware how
Sleeped
talented a rapper Oscar Isaac was. Girl,
Slept on me.
Girl, you've been sleeping on my flow for too long, girl.
Yeah, but yeah, so they all have their different ways in which they've been annihilating themselves, just like we all do. To me, what this machine, I guess for lack of a better word, this genetic engine that the shimmer is, and it's essentially just reflecting the programming, like you were saying, Jack. It's just like in our programming to self-annihilate. It's reflecting the programming and creating a new organism so that there's no such thing as the two things that go into it. If A is a person and B is the shimmer, the thing that comes out is not
AB.
It's
C.
It's like this C thing.
Yeah.
That is parts are made up of A and B randomly and haphazardly.
Right.
In the same way that a mutation works.
Yeah, and many people have pointed out, I actually disagree with this theory, but it's online, so I'll mention it, that she gets knocked out twice in the lighthouse fight.
And there's a switch.
And they're like, so it could have been switched so that
Right.
at that point, the one that leaves is doppelganger. I don't interpret that as what it's supposed to mean, for the simple fact that we see the thing take on the shape of her face, then burn and become metal
and
again.
then he hands her.
I
she
think
hands her
that was
grenade.
the doppelganger. I think
Right.
that clarifies that.
I think they're the same in that moment.
I think the implication is that by the time they leave, she's been impregnated, so to speak, by it, and it's been impregnated by her. So it's not. If you're just looking for the action movie answer, what happened? Yes, the Lena that technically physically went in came out, but now she's C, like Abe said.
Yeah.
She's not Lena. But she's also not purely the doppelganger.
No,
she's a whole new
form
thing.
of sexual mitosis where it mitosis. It's the wrong word. I forget what it is because I don't know if we have something for it. That's why it's so animal-like, because mitosis is just a duplication.
But you mean when it splits into four and you mix up the genes?
Splits into two, splits into four, but the
we
genes
should
are
know,
identical.
Mitochondrial something.
Yeah, but it's not sexual reproduction because it's not coming from two sources.
Yeah, and
it's
I think
just a thing that takes one source and just duplicates it and fucks up.
And
fucks
that's
it all
why
up.
I think visually they're basically dancing, then pressing their bodies together, then laying down together.
But
it
it's
is
also
a metaphor
shot
for
like
like
a
they're
rape
impregnating
scene,
one each
though.
other.
It's
Right.
a metaphor for a rape scene.
Well, I know in the sense that she doesn't want to exchange DNA with the Shimmer, but she does.
yeah.
She cannot.
Lena hits the
Thing,
shadow
so it
monster,
hits
so
her.
it hits her. It falls on the ground, and it just falls and it's just watching and mimicking.
But again,
to become more like it.
one of the points about mutation and refraction is that it's not perfect. It's not like you can do the math and go, it always copies her, so blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
For example, when she's pressed against the door, a lot of people interpret it as, well, she's pushing against the door, so it's pushing against the door. But by that logic, all she would have to do is try to back up, and it would try
Right.
to back up, and that doesn't happen. And there are times where it clearly doesn't mimic her exactly. So I think, like everything in the movie, it's not perfect. It's sloppy. Yes,
Yeah.
it's copying her with some sequences of random mutation. It's copying her, but it also has substance. And what it is a mix of both. And that's what life is.
Yeah. It's definitely not identical when
No.
Right.
it's- yeah.
In the same way that when you refract light and create a prism, you can't put that, at least for those photons, you can't put them back
together.
in.
And make it white light. Right,
Yeah.
right.
I mean, you can find a way to mimic that
White
synthetically.
light. Right.
But
My name's
it-
Oscar
but
Isaac.
that photon has been organized into its red area or its blue area.
Right.
Yeah.
In fact, a prism is a little more organized than the Shimmer actually is, I would say.
No, it's pretty.
because it always goes to Roy G. Viv, whereas the Shimmer's like,
Fuck
Screen
this shit.
Bear, Sharknado,
Yeah.
fuck you.
It's like
Sharknado.
a soap bubble of
Yeah.
That's true.
A soap bubble made of
Sharknado-
puppies.
This is a legit defense for Sharknado being a thing if the Shimmer was canon.
If it combines the DNA of a tornado.
Oh, I
Not
assume,
DNA.
I assume they were the same
The
cinematic universe.
Yeah,
You guys
yeah,
didn't-
you
yeah.
and Birdemic actually
It's
is
supposed to be in the book. It's Florida, I think. It's the Florida Everglades. Which,
Oh, is it?
Which it looks like, or you can kind of tell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they shot all around.
So does Oscar Isaac, he knows that she was having an affair?
Yes. Before he
It's
even
handled
left.
subtly, but it's clear that the
How-
reason he volunteered for a quote unquote suicide mission is he had just recently come to the conclusion she's having an affair. I don't want to be here right now.
What was that based on?
We don't see the clue or how he knows.
Okay.
We
she
just see
figures it out.
it's very subtle. We just see a scene where from looks essentially you can tell that he knows, and you can tell she knows he knows.
Right.
It's just looks.
I thought it
Right.
was the water glass scene because also once again just draping things on top of
because
each
water
other.
refracts.
The water refraction where so
Yeah, there's a lot
the
of that.
fingers reflect each other so they are like the same but they're also different. But if you take the water glass out of there, when she reaches for his hand, he backs away.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a very clearly they
Right.
have something going on.
They've
in the
lost
relationship.
some intimacy
Yeah.
or something.
Yeah.
So when he in the video that we see in the lighthouse tells the doppelganger to find her if it makes it out of the shimmer, and then kills himself. What is he hoping will happen when the doppelganger finds her? Is it payback?
I could accept that he might be, his mind is going, and he just has the instinct, like, if I were you, I would find her because we love her or whatever. Like, I mean, there is a point where your mind starts to break down, so you could just chalk it up to that. A more, like, clear answer, I think, would be that he thinks the doppelganger will be a better mate for her than he even is.
Right. Because while it's true that we can argue that the shimmer itself, or the entity behind the shimmer, may or may not have a want, Oscar Isaac definitely has wants. So this Oscar Isaac Prime, or whatever we're calling them, the C thing, could also share some of those wants and desires. That has kind of been proven in the movie, because if we look at Ventress, she still wants to understand the shimmer. I think she hasn't like disassociated herself from the mission.
He's a lot more cut and dried than Lena. He is the doppelganger. The doppelganger came out.
Definitely him.
Yeah.
I mean,
to me, the only thing that confuses it is you're like, why does he have an accent though? And I think that's just explained by, it's the randomization of everything.
Did one of the other? Do we ever hear one of the other soldiers from his group talk?
Yep, and it's very subtle in the video. It's dope.
Yeah.
It's dope.
Yeah.
It's the guy. There's a second guy who's like kind of just like,
you got this. You got
helping
this.
the operation of camera, like
Right.
just like trying to adjust the light, and it's like, he's just got that. And I love that. Anya says at one point, when they're watching the video, that's not it. I worked as like an EMT for a while. That's just a trick of the light. That's just a trick of the light.
Right.
Like, no fucking
But
way.
also referencing refraction yet again.
Right.
Yeah.
And I also noticed this time how the final shot of them hugging before just the close-ups of the eyes is this panning shot, because they're in this government facility and there's blue-colored plastic sheets hanging down, and the way it pans, they get covered up by 1 and then 2 and then 3. So they get like continuously warped and more colored looking. It's interesting. Yeah, there's just so much attention to detail all
so much
throughout.
attention. I love this is less on theme and more just like a cool way to it's probably CG effect, like, oh, that looks really cool, but it's also might hold water a little bit in thematically, which is, if you look at the shimmer, it looks a lot like, to me, if you drop oil and water, which are not like friends. They're very they hate each other. They're phobic of each other.
Oh, that's interesting.
And so the shimmer has that weird feel where things are blending that ought not be blended.
Right.
Now, I don't think that the movie's trying to say what ought or ought not be blended. I think it's just saying that sometimes we have these strange marriages in nature.
Right.
And it's unlike anything you've seen before, and don't be scared by it. It's just change.
Right.
An interesting theory I read in preparation for this about the Scream Bear specifically, that I do think is probably true, because there's a line where Shepard says, imagine dying and all people know of you is your final horrible moments. I wouldn't like that at all. Sorry, Radek says that, and then she walks into the woods and becomes a tree person. Presumably. You don't see it happen, but that's what we imagine. I think that is a reference to there are cancer patients who choose not to get chemo because they don't want to be remembered that way. They'd rather die. And to me, that really ties. Because the one thing about the movie is the Scream Bear is my favorite sequence, but I always was like, and yet it's not as tightly tied to the themes as everything else, but this saves it for me. I'm like, oh, okay, good. Because I want every single thing in the movie to be a parable, because I believe that that's how Garland operates. And I'm glad I finally found, thank you, Internet, what the Scream Bear, or at least one that makes sense to me that I can imagine is true.
Yeah.
Was the Scream Bear's face like a bear skull, or what?
It's just covered in lesions and decomposing.
Oh, I thought it was a skull. Yeah, I thought it was like its flesh rotted down to the skull
level. I mean, if
level.
you see, here's the thing: is that they didn't light it to that well, and that's not to say that they fucked up. I think it's just that they wanted dark conditions in the room.
Yeah.
But if you actually look at they actually graphic designers drew it out, and it got okayed by Alex Garland, and they made a CG model for it. It just isn't all, like, it's got fur on it but it's got like holes where you see the flesh, where you see the bone.
Yeah.
And I don't know why they just chose the face to be mostly
Well, and
bone.
all of its sensory organs have rotted away or just been shimmered away, which I think is how you're supposed to believe they can just be still. You know,
Yeah.
when they're doing that.
I really like.
I also think it's scream powered, meaning like this time watching it, I got the distinct impression that it only attacks you if you scream. It's waiting for that scream.
Right.
It needs the scream as the go signal.
I really like the idea that like it originally there was just a dead bear carcass
That's
and
a bit
another
rotted.
bear,
Yeah.
and they blended together, become a like half rotting carcass, and then later it also ate Cass, which gave it its voice.
And just from a monster design perspective,
Horrifying.
A bear's skull is the scariest possible version of any animal.
And then in addition to throw your friend's voice into it
Right,
and say,
yeah.
"Help me!"
Right? Yeah.
Help me.
Yeah.
It's one of the worst conceptions of a monster since like The Thing.
Yeah.
It's my favorite.
Yeah. It's pretty fucked up.
Did anyone else notice the tattoo is the logo from the front of the Neverending Story book?
No.
Like the book in Neverending Story that you use to activate the...
Is an Ouroboros?
I just kept wanting... Yeah, it's a silver Ouroboros in the Infinity. I just kept wanting her to summon Falcor and get out and shimmer triumphantly.
Well, Falcor is definitely a shimmered version.
That's
of
what it would not
a
be.
dog and a dragon.
It wouldn't have been weird if Falcor came down in this movie.
Yeah.
It would have been weird if he helped her, though, because everything was so menacing at all times.
Yeah. Just
it's
cruel
nature.
and unwavering. Yeah.
While on
Neutral.
Raddick, people make a lot of that. She says Ventress wants to face it, which I imagine means... I think they do draw the dichotomy between all the previous groups were soldiers and this group is all scientists. So there's the idea of the universe is incomprehensible. You can fight that or try to understand it. But both processes, they're more similar than you think. Like destroying something, sometimes to understand something is to destroy it. Sometimes by destroying something, you come to understand it. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, that is.
Also read
that's
online
a
that,
good point.
and I'm like, that probably is true, that the all-female team sort of harkens to breast cancer being the most prevalent form of cancer in humans. And I was like, oh, that could be a thing. I don't know. Could be.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because they don't address that, like that
Once-
we're all women and
Natalie Portman
Not really.
says,
Oh, yeah.
we're all women. And she goes, we're all scientists.
Right.
You sexist Natalie
Right.
Portman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
And
we
I'm
know
sexist for noticing
there's
it.
two signs. Well, Ventress has. That's one of the reasons she's also disassociated. Is that she has an arc that she has cancer.
Yeah.
And then the other time we see cancer in the real life is Cass's daughter died of leukemia.
Leukemia.
Right.
So there's this kind of awareness of cancer, or it surrounds us, but the way it's done is it just feels like it's like, oh, also sometimes humans get cancer. Less
Right.
than like thematically it's important that her daughter died of cancer.
right.
It's just kind of like a thing to make you, put cancer in your head kind of thing.
The
Don't put cancer in
Oh,
my
I-
head.
I'm trying, but it keeps happening.
the thing where they wake up and they think it's their first morning and
it's
they've
not,
actually been
yeah.
there for 5 days. Why do you think that? It's like a cool trick, but I didn't really get why that was happening.
So they walk into the shimmer. She has a flashback that at first you just think is a flashback, but then you realize because she wakes up, it was her dream.
It relates
Right.
to her infidelity.
Yeah, I think it's that my interpretation is that this is the scanning part of the process of the shimmer.
Okay, got it.
So it's like finding out all the information, and it might
Ingesting
just
all of your
put you
thoughts.
to sleep in order to do so.
Got it.
Or you're just so unreliable as a narrator. You did do things like obviously they ate
Right.
and they aren't hungry.
It
So
could be simply
they're
to
up and around or eating.
establish that the shimmer makes you go crazy eventually. Like
Yeah,
maybe
I
you
think-
just wanted to establish that at that time.
I think that's what it was, just to really throw you that it's like in this space there's monsters, but there's also you yourself are becoming a monster.
Question. I had a favorite pet theory the first time, but now I think I'm wrong the second time. So I guess my question is, do you think that the shimmer being in the lighthouse accepts the phosphorus grenade, understanding what a grenade is and what death is, and not caring because it doesn't care about life and death? Or I thought that my initial interpretation was that the reason Lena is essentially the chosen one is because her entire reason for going in, because Ventress is about curiosity. Everyone has different like motivators. Her motivation is pure guilt and self-loathing. She's going in because she feels she owes Oscar Isaac, and this is her only way to like redeem the sin that she committed. So that I was wondering if when the shimmer's imitating her on a physical level, it's probably also imitating her mental space, right? Because it's learning to act like her. So my theory was that the reason she can defeat it and no one else could is because it imitates her self-loathing. So when she offers it the phosphorus grenade, it's like, you want to kill yourself? Oh, I want to kill myself.
Oh,
and
right.
it's like a trick, or like it's almost like a coding trick or an infinite loop.
Someone brought up the idea that there's a duplicate of her. They're duplicates now, but they're slightly different. If you believe that this is a version of Portman killing a part of herself, the part that is guilty for
the part that committed the sin.
Symbolically,
it is that, but is it also literally that happening?
I don't like that interpretation.
Okay.
I like that the idea of these duplicates are the same,
right?
In every sense, or they're the same, made of the same stuff. But when she is resigned or whatever, the monster, one of them is resigned to accepting the flash grenade.
Yeah,
is just knows that one will make out, and that's just as good. It doesn't have a want. Things are happening to it, and it's completed its process. So it is now a duplicate.
Could you also accept the interpretation that it didn't even know what the phosphorus grenade would do per se? It just grabbed a thing because a thing was held out?
I think it would. But one can argue that all of the knowledge of phosphorus grenades went into one.
But I guess I would argue that the only thing the shimmer does do, the only thing we know about its function, is that it wants to expand and multiply.
Replicate.
And so I don't know why it would knowingly let itself get burned to death. And if the argument is that, well, because it got a duplicate out, it already got a duplicate out. Cain is a duplicate. So why didn't it destroy itself
because
at that
I think
point?
this is a truly alien, that it completed its process of duplication. There's nothing other than that.
Right, I know, but I'm saying then why didn't the phosphorus grenade, if you follow me, that Cain lit to burn himself up, why didn't it go, the process is complete now, I'll let myself burn? Why did it put that fire out?
I think there's another Cain around. I think Cain is filming his own duplicate.
Yeah, I know. We see him walk in a frame.
So one person
Maybe my
dies.
question isn't clear.
One version dies by grenade. Another just walks right out. So
right, and I'm saying, Jack, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. Why does one in both cases need to die? I guess.
Right. Why would in both cases, the original person lights a phosphorus grenade and the duplicate walks out? Let's say, this is assuming Lena's a duplicate, but it doesn't really matter. I'm saying, why did it let itself burn to death when Lena did it and not when Cain did it? Because Cain already completed its process. It got a duplicate out. Cain got out. Not only that, but he literally started a phosphorus grenade fire that it had to, we assume, actively put out. Otherwise, it would have burned up. So it chose to let a phosphorus grenade get exploded inside itself, put that one out. Then another person came, it duplicated that person, Lena, and said, now the process is done. It just seems arbitrary that it's like, does it want two? Is that necessary? It wants to make a couple? I guess we don't have to
Adam
know. That could make sense. Maybe its goal is to make a couple.
I think so, because I think the idea is then that one of those two will split into two, and that's exponential growth.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like the same thing just happened twice. So it doesn't need to die. It just is fine with dying.
That's what I'm saying. So I think the most acceptable interpretation to me is it just grabbed the phosphorus grenade, not necessarily knowing what it would do, and then it did that, and it's fine with it.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's even more haunting that it knew what it was going to do, and it's fine with that.
That doesn't make any sense.
Why?
Because
That's
of what
makes
Jack.
it so alien.
No, but I don't want to kill too much time, but you're not gathering the logic matrix that Jack and I think both are on, which does make sense.
Okay.
That contradicts other logic in the film.
I don't see
if
why.
it's true that way. Okay, I'll try one more time. Because if the shimmer it says, I know I'm going to die, I choose to die from this phosphorus grenade, you have to ask, why now? Because all the exact same conditions were already previously met. You had someone here, you duped them successfully, the dupe got out, and they lit a phosphorus grenade. Why not burn up then? Why on the second time? That's arbitrary.
Well, wouldn't it be
It did it-
because
wait,
Oscar Isaac
that's
was... It wasn't the dupe who burned up.
It was Oscar Isaac.
It was Oscar
No,
Isaac.
they're
Right.
the same. That's my argument. They're the same thing. So there's two Oscar Isaacs in the room. One is filming another, yes?
Yes.
So-
the one filming is the dupe, and the one burning up is the original.
Or they're both dupes.
Alex Garland's confirmed that, though.
Okay. I guess I figured that that's the same thing that happened to Lena.
I think something different happened to Lena. I think in his case, it's much more cut and dried. A dupe got out and the original was killed. In her case, a weird melding mutation of both happened. I think they're different.
But both of
I
their...
think different things happen in their
Okay.
case, in both cases.
And that, hey, I mean, I think that's...
and my
a good sign of it's a good
sure.
sign of a bad movie, but also a good movie when multiple interpretations can come out. I got the reason I got to where I am is because in the final shots they both have shimmers in their eyes, as if to say they both are kind of the same.
Yes, but the dialogue really gives it away because she says, "Are you Kane?" and he says, "No." Then he says, "Are you Lena?" No answer. So they're different things happen to him. He concretely knows that he's not Kane. She doesn't know what she is. So they're different in that way.
But if you remember at the beginning of the movie, when she finds out that he might be a duplicate, he asks her and he says, "I don't know."
Right.
So there might just be time synchronicity, like the idea that he didn't know when he walked in home. But then over time he realized, you know what? I realized I'm not.
But the reason
I'm something new.
But also the reason he has organ failure is because he's a duplicate that is getting too far from the copy machine.
Yes.
I would argue that he's definitely a duplicate, but it is okay to disagree, especially on this movie.
I think they're all duplicates.
He stabilizes when she gets out, right? When she
Right.
gets out of the shimmer. Do we have any
That's what I'm trying
logic on why that is?
I'm trying to guess at the shimmer's logic, knowing that it doesn't have logic, but it
Right.
still operates in patterned ways, if that makes sense.
I
Right.
see.
Yeah.
I still feel that the pattern is consistent, but that's fine.
The only inconsistency to me is why it would let itself burn up when Lena did it, but not when Kane did it.
Right.
I felt it did.
No. No, we mean burn the entire shimmer.
Right.
Like
the
it
entire
disappears
shimmer
from the
burns
face of the
down
earth.
after the...
When Kane gets duped and lights a phosphorus grenade, the shimmer only allows the fire to burn his body, and then it puts the fire out.
Oh, right.
When Lena burns it with a phosphorus
see what you
grenade,
mean.
it
Yeah.
allows the
I thought
entire shimmer to
I
vanish.
thought you were talking about why one person is allowed to die in the lighthouse.
We've-
You mean the shimmer itself?
We finally
the whole
reached what
shimmer.
we were disconnected
Right. Yeah.
on. So now,
So-
what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, because the shimmer's gotten out. Like enough, they now can duplicate forever.
It might be. I think it's actually we kind of
it's-
stumbled on. It might be because they're a mating pair. It completed
They're a
the
mating
thing.
pair that allow, and mating not necessarily in the sense of sexual reproduction, but in the sense of like, it has now infiltrated us. It is the thing that has reached the mainland. The shimmer doesn't need to be this coaxing.
It doesn't have to be a
ecological
bubble.
It's now found humanity and is like,
And is
oh,
inside
humanity
you.
works like this, and they have a love, and now I'm understanding that
We can use that as our
I
vector.
can take over civilization and reduplicate civilization now. So it's more interested.
And what's interesting is the civilization
Maybe.
it creates will still have stuff in common with human civilization because it's just going to mutate it. It's not
Right.
like an alien invasion where the aliens wipe us out and build their shit.
Yeah.
It's like if a new kind of gut virus got incorporated into all of us.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would we
Very
even
interesting.
notice?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I love, I guess, I mean, the fact that your eyes glow rainbow, people might eventually
Right.
notice. But there's also one of the littlest details that the internet found is when she takes a sip of water at the end, the final interrogation scene, and sets it down, the condensation on the water glass falls away in a way where it's perfectly duplicate, like the doughs were.
Mm-hmm.
Like two water droplets are clones of each other,
Yeah.
implying that I think that Lena and Kane now kind of emit what the
a
shimmer
radiation
is
of
anyway.
shimmer. Yep.
So they're gonna mutate stuff just by
Just by
being around
existing.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when they eat like a fried chicken, will they then like scream like the chicken from
Yeah.
that point forward?
Yeah. No, they'll scream like the crunch of the fried chicken, you
okay.
see, because
Got
they
it.
weren't there for the killing of the
That's
chicken,
true,
just for the
that's true.
eating of the
Unless
chicken.
they ate the chicken raw.
Yeah, then yes.
Yes.
So
Got it.
that's Annihilation 2.
The sequel writes itself.
Well, is there anything else we
What a
want to
head
talk
trip.
about this one?
I'm out of stuff, but I know you've been waiting for this one for a long while, and I
No,
really
I mean, we
dominated
all-
the final leg of it.
We
so
all
do you have
kind
other
of
stuff?
talked about
Yeah.
it. I mean, I feel like I mentioned everything. I just think people should go see it. It's I think my favorite film in the last 5 years, definitely.
And
Oh,
hope,
wow.
Yeah.
hopefully, maybe some of these spoilers will let you go in with more confidence, because I do think it's not like it's less challenging even than Enemy. Enemy's more obscure than this.
Yeah,
Like,
it's not a primer.
you can handle it. Watch it. You'll figure it out, and
Yeah.
you'll be very satisfied when you do.
Yeah.
I will say her looking into the fractal bulb feels like an obvious homage to the It's Full of Stars thing from 2001: A
Yeah.
Space
2001,
Odyssey.
yeah.
But just the balls on Kubrick, I just looked it up because I was wondering. That sequence in 2001: A Space Odyssey, 13 and a half minutes long of him looking in the light.
That's
Hers is
amazing.
like 50 seconds and you still start to be like, all right, fight the thing already.
It is beautiful, though. It is
Yeah.
beautiful.
It is pretty cool.
Oh, how beautiful are the way the metal thing reacts to gunshots, where it just becomes like art behind its
Yeah.
back.
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
And it just like kind of walks and like they stay there as if that like
Their trajectory is
yeah
Yeah.
the steam from like the explosion or something like that has now been codified into metal.
yeah.
It's just like it's a really trippy fucking movie.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it doesn't just work on the genetic level. It's as if the concept of the bullet's exit trajectory was combined with the concept of metal. It's
right.
not
And
even
the bullet
genetic.
itself.
Right.
Yeah. In other words, the things that we do, we leave awake behind is, I think, the emotional resonance of the movie.
Yeah.
So there's that.
All right. Well, it looks like the rain broke and we're in Los Angeles, so everyone better bolt home while the roads are safe.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Might be okay.
How can we find you online, Jack?
You can find me on Twitter at Jack_O'Brien, and I host a week daily podcast called The Daily Zeitgeist with Miles Gray, former guest.
And you do not mean it's like a daily podcast that's week.
No.
You mean Monday to
Very
Friday.
soft daily podcast.
And then when at the weekly recap, when is that? Saturdays or
Saturday,
Sundays?
I think.
Okay.
Yeah. But
Weekly
yeah, so
Zeitgeist
Monday through
also.
Friday, where we talk about whatever's happening in the zeitgeist at that point.
Highly suggested to go listen to it if you have.
Yeah. Helps you keep abreast of what's happening. Nice.
Nice.
Yeah. So check that out.
Cool. Thank you
Cool.
for being here, man.
Thank you
very
guys for
much.
having me. This
yeah,
was
always
a
nice
lot
to
of
catch
fun.
up.
Yeah.
Abe,
What?
are you Abe?
No, I'm C. I'm something. I'm C now.
A, B, or C.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I kind of fell apart, didn't it?
Well, it's a lot stronger bit when you see that we were all able to make our eyes glow rainbow. But
Yeah.
It's tough on an audio medium.
Yeah, we should figure that one out.
Frame rate, we out. This has been a Small Beans endeavor. We're a bunch of pals who make podcasts, sketches, music, web series, and movies. The Beans always have new ideas percolating, so make sure to check us out at patreon.com/smallbeans. That's patreon.com/smallbeans, where you can browse all of our current and past content, see what we've got planned in the future, and learn how your support can help the small beans grow into huge, giant monster beans. If you enjoyed this content module, please like, rate, subscribe, or tell a friend about us. We love you!